Anywho, I remember your lovely face from a summit that we did together.
Yes, we did the social media and the next decade summit. Just, I think it feels like maybe a month ago. I don't know. Time feels like it's been flying so fast with the holidays and everything that's like happened since then. But yeah, we got a chance to meet and connect
Exactly.
there. So I'm
We
so excited to
did.
be here today.
Oh, yay! I love it when people are excited. So yeah, I was like, as soon as you popped on, like your name didn't necessarily like grab me at first, but as soon as your face popped on, I was like, oh, I recognize her. That's so awesome.
Yay.
So we had a really good time with that summit. What was her name? The lady that hosted the summit. I should know.
Robin
Miss
Smith.
Robin Smith. Yes, Miss Robin is awesome. And she was so lovely and gracious and kind and patient because I think we had to
Right?
record mine twice because we had some interruptions and it was just
Oh no.
crazy. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
she took on such a big challenge too. I launched a summit actually this morning, my second annual summit, and I did 15 guests, and that was a lot of work. And she did like 40 or 50 or 6. I don't even know what the end number ended up being for her, but she took on such a big commitment doing that many interviews in such a short time span.
She
So that
did.
was
And it was a
amazing that
short
she put
time
that together.
span. She's amazing. I'm like, I'm doing my summit in March, April timeframe. And she was like, if you need any help, just let me know. And I was like, I'm definitely going to take you up on that offer.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm here too. I've done two now, and I've learned a thing or two. I still don't have it completely 100% figured out. It's like a learning curve every single time, right? But this year's summit was so much easier, like the tech side of like the behind the scenes pieces.
Yeah.
Once you do it one time, it's like riding a bike. You're like, oh, I remember how I did this last year. Like, and you learn from your mistakes, and you learn what went well, and then you can just take it all together. So
Got to take the training wheels off.
yes, you do. As
That's
scary
so
as it is
cool.
sometimes.
That's awesome. So what was the name of your summit, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking?
Yeah, it's called Attract and Stand Out Brand Building Virtual Summit.
Mhm.
And it's 15 interviews with experts that are out there running online businesses. And we're talking about things from PR, how to use Facebook for your marketing ads, how to use Pinterest to grow your traffic and increase exposure. We have conversations about human design and how to like really listen to your intuition and do things that feel really good to you when it comes to marketing, and not doing what everybody else tells you should be doing, but actually do like what feels good in your heart so that you're showing up as your most authentic self. And I even went a little woo this time. I have somebody who's teaching us about brand astrology and how to use like our
Ooh.
astrology signs for branding ourselves with our colors and kind of how we're showing up. So it's been a lot of fun, like just having a chance to have these conversations. And like I said, it kicked off this morning. So everybody's being led to a Facebook group where we're able to engage and have conversations, and people are actually listening to the interviews and they're asking questions, and they're like, oh my gosh, that was like the most amazing thing that you said in this interview for how to do this, and I'm implementing it right away. So it's been fun to see them actually taking action and taking the tips and the tools they're learning and already implementing them into their day-to-day lives, which is fun because I know I listen to a lot of content. I'm like what I call a lifetime learner. So I'm always taking in information, and sometimes I act on it and I'm like, yay, I did something with that information. And to be honest, like there's other times where we just listen and we forget that we were supposed to do something or that we're going to try that new technique. So I'm glad that people are actually in the group and they're asking questions and they're engaging and they're actually doing the work. They're taking the steps to grow their businesses.
Exactly. Oh, yes. It is good when you can put content out there that is useful and it's not just another piece of information that just sits on the shelf. Um,
Yeah.
and it's only useful, like you said, when people take advantage of it, right? So everybody I feel has something valuable to put out there. It's not a question of your value, but are people actually going to take advantage of it? And it's great when people do that, when you get to see the fruit of their labor, which is them implementing, and then you're like, oh, yes, it's so exciting. They're actually learning something. My book called Mindset to Manifest 10-Day Challenge, I love it because it's a book. It can sit on your shelf, but if you don't actually go through the pages and journal and process and do all of that, you're not going to get anything out of it. So Totally get it. All right. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction for anyone that is new to my podcast. The podcast is called Branded for His Glory. And the reason why I named it that is because I do believe that God is he's all about business. He is the first creator. And as we're in business for ourselves, we're actually creating. Like everything we put our hands to, we create, right? And there's a book by Jordan Rayner. I absolutely love him. I talk about him all the time. Hopefully I get to meet him in person one day. Just, put that out there into the atmosphere. But he talks about how, God is the first entrepreneur, and he created and he put everything out into the world. And because he created us, that we are an extension of God, right? We are his design, we are his creation. So we're going to have that natural tendency to want to create also. So whenever we're creating for his purpose, for his glory. So that is the reason why I decided to name the podcast that, because especially as moms, we are building our families, we're raising our children, and this whole thing is for mompreneurs. So it's almost like this whole life excellence piece around being able to operate our businesses and operate our households and to keep things running, and to, that branded for his glory is bigger than just business. It's our lives, it's our marriages, it's our children. We have that brand on us that says, we're a light in the world, or the salt of the earth, so to speak. So I wanted to ask you, which will be the first time I've asked someone this, and this is like the 4th episode, when you heard that phrase, branded for his glory, what did that mean to you? Or how did it make you interested in being on this, the live meet and greet / podcast?
Yeah. So I think it's a beautiful way to express like his love and his, like what he brings to us. And we all are like an extension, a piece of his brand, right? For showing up in the world. So I think it's a beautiful way just to connect those pieces of our personal lives, as well as like our lives as we're following him and growing as humans. But as far as like being interested in being on the podcast, I just think you're amazing. Like we said before, you stood out to me during the last summit, and I just loved your heart and how you showed up. And I try to be as real and as authentic as I possibly can be when it comes to growing my business. And I saw that you mirrored that to me. You were showing up as your true self and just showing and shining and showing who you truly are. So that was kind of like why I wanted to talk with you and get to know you even more, and see how our lives could connect, and how we could help encourage and help each other grow our businesses.
Yes, thank you so much. I received that. I receive all of that.
Soak it all in, girl.
Yes. And I will say, like, this is crazy why this is popping up for me, but tend to be like you, and I'll say speak in the past, because God has done so much work on this heart of mine. But I used to be a person that was very self-conscious and like always worried about like what people were thinking of me, what they like, if I moved the wrong way, like is someone not going to like me, or they're going to judge me, or they're going to talk about me. And there was always like this halo or this cloud of like insecurity over me. So part of my healing from that is like when people like comment or say anything that is like positive or uplifting, I have to like in that moment openly receive it, because I will tend to like do this, like block those compliments or receive the goodness and receive what the good things that people see about me. So I think that I know that I appreciate those kind words that you shared with me, and just want to kind of, share that with anyone else that might be dealing with those insecurities or constant questioning of yourself. It's like we can be amazing people, like have all these talents and skills. We totally are, because that's the way God has designed us. He's gifted us each uniquely, and still be self-conscious and still be so insecure. And it's like when you're building a business, there's like the duality of the brand, like the part that you put out when you're like in offer mode or you're in promotion mode, and you're just putting that part out. But then behind the scenes, people don't get to see that like you're shaking in your boots, or you're like, oh my gosh, I hope people actually like this, or I hope people take advantage of this. And then when they do, when they get all these amazing results, then you still have to process that too. You're like, oh, okay, how do I process that part? So that's a lot of just sharing kind of like the internal stuff that kind of goes on, where people if they see you and they think you're here, they think things are perfect, or that you never question or you never doubt. And I love that I can share that with my clients. My clients always say, Tina, you are very transparent. I will tell them like, oh, zero launch this time. Like, I didn't make any money when I launched this time, you know, because I think that we have to be real about those things. And I believe that if we're hiding certain parts of that, it's just the lying by omission, you know, or trying to perpetrate something that's not really there. So I just got on my soapbox about the whole vulnerability piece.
No, and I would I love that you brought that up, because especially in the online marketing space, like we have online businesses, so we see a lot of people launching and sharing information and influencers and experts and all the people, right? And we always like question, like, are they showing up as their true self? Like, is that like, I would like to know that if I were to meet you in person, and I think I would know, like, you would be the same person that I'm talking to right now versus if I saw you on stage and you were speaking, or if we met at a cocktail party and we were just meeting for the first time. Like, how you show up has to be exactly the same online as in real life, right? Because it confuses those if they portray you one way and then they meet you and they're like, wow, like, you're not at all what I expected, or like they're put off a little bit because they're like, wow, I've been following you, or I've been watching you do videos and connecting with you online for all this time, then I meet you in person and I'm like, you're not even who you said you were. Like, you're a fraud to a degree, right? So it's important, like, and I think it's hard for us though, because we want to like present ourselves in a way that attracts people in and people get to know who we are. Like, it's hard to like determine how am I really showing up online as if I would in person? So I always tell my clients, like, you know, I'm real with them because I know most of them from from either being on phone calls or Zoom calls when it's like a one-to-one space versus like they're online. And it's like, it's ask people, like, who is it that you know? Like, ask your best friends, have your family see your videos and be like, is that how I am in real life? Am I acting different? One of the people that I follow just recently was sharing that she had like a team meeting, and she's super goofy and funny, and like she sings in like all of her Facebook lives, and like she's like super animated. And they were like, you're not as much like that, like when we're in this hotel room while we're doing our planning session. And I thought that was super interesting because I know her pretty well, and she is that way. But for her team members in that setting, meeting her for the first time, it was a little bit different. And
a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah. So trying to make sure that whether you're making a Facebook Live or you're doing a podcast interview or you're on stage, like, being who you really are all the time, so that you don't have to like make yourself be like you are when you're online, right? Like, you can just show up as yourself and be authentic and be real and not have to worry about, well, how am I carrying myself? Am I carrying myself different? Like, if I normally am like goofy in this way, like, be goofy in every single way. Like, be goofy on stage, be goofy on your Facebook Lives, because people are going to love those quirks about you. Those are the things a lot of times that stand out and people remember and they recognize it. So if they saw you on a live and they saw you on stage, they're like, oh, like, she's just as silly or as, you know, spunky or as whatever, whatever traits coming out for you, because we're all different. We all have different quirks about ourselves, but knowing like that you're showing up real and authentic, it's special, I think, when you see somebody and you're like, wow, like, you didn't disappoint. Like, you're exactly who you said you were. And thank you for doing that, because I think we see so many influencers that we don't really trust that they drive a Ferrari, or that they have this big mansion in the background, or that they were at the Eiffel Tower, or whatever. Like, it's fine if you're on vacation at the Eiffel Tower, like, yeah, take a picture. But if that's like your brand, but you really live in a totally different environment, like, don't try to make yourself into somebody that you're not. Just show up authentically as yourself, so that you can attract the people towards you that you're meant to talk to and who you're meant to make an impact with, and let them know like the true you.
Exactly. Oh yeah. And I think that it's a continuous journey. Like, even for myself as a which I call myself the soul brand alignment strategist because I love the energy healing work and the branding and business strategy stuff. But it's even myself, like, even though I do this work and I'm helping my clients do this work, I'm continually evolving also, you know, and I think that idea of like evolving or growing or settling in, so to speak, because I chose to go on that journey and because I've been like, okay, I'm going to do it and I keep going, I can then help others that come, you know, through and they're wanting to do that same thing as well. So I think that it's almost like a responsibility or a charge to myself to like just show up in that way, you know. So I see it as a responsibility, and we can talk about this whole conversation and it just be like, you know, in like a general, like, okay, when you're branding and you show up and be authentic and blah blah, but when we pair spirituality to that and we pair our belief and our faith system to that, it becomes even more serious because it's like, who do you serve? And having that authenticity and that, you know, that obedience to Christ and knowing that we're honoring him through the process, I think is so important. And it means even more when you're bringing glory to his name. You definitely want to show up authentic and real and in alignment with your values and what you believe in. So saying all of that, I would love to ask you, can you tell me about what prompted you to start your business, or what prompted you to get into the work that you're in now?
Yeah, so my background is in retail management. So right after high school, I started working for what I call big box retail management. I worked for Best Buy. Everybody's like, well, what does big box mean? I'm like, it's not really that important, but everybody likes to know. And I was a single mom. I had my oldest son, he's 24 now, but I was 17 when I got pregnant with him my senior year in high school. And I graduated high school in June and then had him in November. So my first job was retail management. And I don't know if you're familiar with the retail management world, but I was expected to work like 60 plus hours a week and pretty much always be there. And you could never take a day off because district was coming, or there was going to be a big walkthrough, or there was a new product release. And like, there was just all these things. And so I found myself a young mom. So I was figuring life out, right? Like at 18 years old, like figuring out how to be a mom and how to show up and be there for him. And I knew that I wanted to like provide like the best life for him. And I wanted him to be loved on and to be cared for. And I was working all these hours. And thankfully, I had support from my mom and my grandma. They were able to help me when I was at work. But I found that I just wasn't fulfilled, and I was missing things being home with him. Like I didn't miss like his first steps, but I wasn't like, there was, you know how as a mom, you have all those, every single moment we treasure, whether it's like the first or it's the last. Like it's like we just love to be there for all those moments. I wasn't tucking him in bed every single night, and that was something that like dug in my heart. I was like, I wanted to be there. Like the nights that I was able to be home and tuck him in, like I treasured him, and I wasn't able to because of the crazy hours that I was working. And I was kind of, for probably about 4 to 5 years, I was just in that like moment where I was going to work, doing the thing because I did love my job. I loved what I did. I loved that I was helping my employees promote within the company, helping them be the best that they could be. And I got to this place where I was like, I need more. And I still sat on it. I don't know why. Like when you look back, sometimes you're like, what was it like that held me back so much from like taking that leap of faith and like jumping forward and knowing that I was going to be provided for and like that God would always be there to catch me. But I stayed for like 5 or 6 years that I just kept staying. And it took a really big moment for me to really realize that it was time to change, that life is short. I lost my mom in a tragic car accident. And my son was in the car with her. He was 5 years old. And we lost her that day, but thank God, like he was okay. He had to have a little bit of minor surgeries, but he came out alive. Mm-hmm. And that moment like shifted everything for me. My mom was one of my best friends. Like she helps, like she was like my biggest cheerleader, my best friend. And I remember a moment during her funeral service when we were walking from the like service to the burial grounds. And I remember turning around and just seeing like a flood of people. Like my mom had made such an impact on so many people in their lives. And it like floored me. Like it gut wrenched me. Like I remember just like standing there and like losing it again, because it was just like a sea of people. And I was like, this is what life is about. Like making an impact and showing up and being who you want to be. And it was that moment for me that really changed like everything for me. Like as soon as I went, like after it took a little bit of time, obviously going through like the emotions of losing my mom and dealing with that and making sure my son was okay. And I remember like going back to work and I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm not living my sole purpose. I'm not living the life that I meant to at this moment. And I started like seeding out, like, how am I going to change this? Like, what do I want to do? And I remember I put an application or my resume on monster.com. I don't even know if monster.com is even a thing anymore.
Tell our age now.
I might be dating myself here. I'd be like talking about MySpace.
Oh yeah, I had one of those too.
Yeah. But I put an application or my resume up on monster.com. And I remember that one of the first people that reached out to me was a lady who was marketing for a business coaching franchise. And I was like, what, a franchise? First of all, I was like, not even sure, like if I'm in a space to like purchase a franchise, but her emails were super intriguing. And so I decided to set up an interview with her. And while she was talking, my jaw just like hit the floor. And I'm like, everything that she was describing was who I was. Like, yes. I've naturally been the person that people came to and asked for advice and wanted help working through things. My role at Best Buy was basically promoting my employees up. And I did a lot of that. Like a lot of my employees were able to promote to supervisor. I helped some of them become managers. And I saw myself in that. And I was like, wow, this is like, I didn't even know what a business coach was. I was thinking like, I don't know, like what the heck is a business coach? Like, tell me more. Like, I'm like, the word wasn't that common yet. And so I bought a franchise, to put it shortly, which surprised the crap out of me. I'm like, who am I? Like, I just, like, that was like a whole new version of myself was coming forward. Like I was putting trust out there in the world that I could show up and do something that was completely out of my my training and what I had meant to do. Yeah. And it was amazing. Like I was able to learn how to take what I had learned in retail management from the HR and training side, and I just flipped it over to the business side, and I learned all the business ways to do it. Mm-hmm. And I was able to go out and coach and develop business owners to help them create their businesses. And it was so cool to like take like that prior knowledge that I didn't even realize was like
transferable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that it was like applicable even to like the business side, and started a business. So that was back in 2007. So it's been a little while now.
That is beautiful. That's 13 years. I did my math real quick.
You're good.
13 years. That is so cool. If I can share how I got started in business. Let's see. I got started in business. I didn't have a loss, which I did want to speak to that. I heard you on that about losing your mother and your son being in the car with her. That's a lot. That's heavy. Yeah. That's heavy stuff, because then you begin to process, like, my son could have been gone too, So I totally, I hear it. I can't say I always hate to go and say, oh, I completely understand, or I feel. I don't, because, I've not experienced that, but.
I'm blessed and glad that you have never had to experience it. Like, that's not something anybody should ever experience.
Yeah. But to hear, and I'm sure for your mother to see that you allow that to be that, the catalyst for you to live a life that you truly like love and lights you up, and you get to see yourself in a different light. And that was something that you said too, like seeing yourself in a different light. And I think that's something that I struggled with, where some people have the stories about like, oh, I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur because I sold lemonade when I was a kid and I did all that. Like, I don't have that story either. Like, I didn't know that this was going to happen. Although my mom did run a daycare when I was young, but it was an in-home daycare. And so she kind of started, she does have that entrepreneur background a little bit. And I really didn't even make that connection until I was in my 30s, my late 20s, that wow, maybe that is why I'm a little bit interested in entrepreneurship. Yeah. And I got to see my mom work from home, be there for us 24/7. Some days I feel like I wish she would leave the house. Like, can I sneak someone in? Like, dang. Not sneaking nobody in, because mama's always home. And so I did get to see her fill that role of, running a business and being there for her children, so I think that might have shaped my values around, like, okay, after I went into like the private sector, because I did go to college. I did get a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in human service counseling with a concentration in business. And I did the case management. I worked in the mental health field for a bit, but then I married a soldier, and then that throws a wrench in things because you get, stationed so many different places. Yeah. And it's like, I would establish myself at one place, and then it's like, I got to start all over again, and that has everything to do with like branding yourself and building up, your business or your reputation or whatever. Every time you move, you got to start all over. And it's a lot. It was a lot. And I found myself looking for work all the time. And then I got to a place where I was like, okay, well, I've been applying for jobs for like over a year. I still haven't gotten anything. I need to stop waiting on someone else to employ me and create something for myself. And I think that was my launching point, where I was like, you know what? I need to create something for myself. So I did start on top of the fact that I got pregnant and my son was born. And then it was like, oh, wait, do I really want to go back to work? When I have my second child, did I really want to go back to work when I have my second child? So it was that combination of looking for work and having children and saying, I'm just going to do something that I've always loved. And for me, that was the makeup artistry and the hair design. Like, I always wanted to be a cosmetologist, but my parents were like, you're not going to cosmetology school. We're paying for college. We're not paying for that. So they wanted me to get the, official degree or whatever. And I still had student loans because they sent me to some crazy private school that cost a whole bunch of money. So they paid for what they could, and I had to pay for the rest. But I ended up starting my own makeup business. And that's like, with the past of years of network marketing stuff that I was not satisfied with, it was like, the satisfaction came from that makeup artistry business. And it was just beautiful, and it was hard, and it was a lot of work, but I had to trust God in that process. And I think that's where the other side of like just doing business to God's glory, it was like, even though I was a makeup artist, I still had to deal with myself. I still had to deal with the spiritual side of things. I still had to deal with the fears of putting my portfolio out there. I still had to deal with the doubts of, is anybody really going to work with me? I still had to deal with the, I have to wait till I get to this level before I can actually like reach out to certain people, when God all along the way was saying, I already created you for this. Stop holding yourself back with your own thoughts. Right? Lean not to your own understanding and just do what I tell you to do. So it was a lot of, I would say, biblical like references to like how I had to shift my mindset before I could experience the successes in my makeup artistry business, because I literally quit my business one day at my kitchen table. I was crying so bad because nothing was connecting. And I was like, you know what, God, obviously this isn't connecting. I'm doing something wrong. I'm going to put it in your hands. That is a defining moment in my life where I just put it in his hands. I was like, I'm going to stop. And less than a week later, my business took off. It was like, I started getting random calls out of the blue from like past people that I had connected with that didn't want to connect with me, or for whatever reason, maybe they didn't see it. We don't always know all the background, but when you see what connects, and I realized for me, that was letting go. That was to stop striving so hard. That was to allow God to to allow him to do his part. Like, we can't try to take over the whole process and like, that hustle and not like be in that co-partnership with him and that resting point of listening to his direction and where he's taken us. do you have a defining moment in your business where you invited God, the Holy Spirit, whatever it is, to kind of like be that like guiding point for you? Do you have a moment that you can share with us? And I say us, as in all the listeners.
Of course. Yeah. I feel like I invite him in often. So I could probably have a new story almost every day or every week. I grew up a believer and going to church, and I definitely have had my times where I've been super involved. And then there's also been the times where like I would, take my steps backwards and for whatever reason, like not put my trust always there. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like a specific example. I feel like the story I shared, like about my mom and losing her, like that was definitely a God moment for me. Like it was, that was, I can't really, I've never stepped away from the church. Like I think like as a young adult, like I was finding my own way. And after growing up, going to church pretty much almost every Sunday, and then becoming an adult, and I was working retail management. So I worked most Sundays. So just kind of like the young adult life kind of had taken me away just because my availability had changed and I wasn't able to get there. But I do remember after losing my mom, I remember sitting with my son and telling him like, we have to go back to church. Like we have to do things differently. And like, that was when I pulled back in and like got, and maybe I'm mixing my story, but let me take a step back. He was like 10, like 9 or 10. So it was probably like 4 years after. Okay. It wasn't immediately like right after. Like I knew that I needed to do those things, but I was still working retail management. But when I left and started my business, that was when I had Sunday availability open. And that's when I could go back to church again. And I remember we purchased a house in Las Vegas. That's where I'm born and raised from. I live in Southern California now. But I purchased my first house. And I remember thinking like, I want to go back to church. And I had moved to the southwest part of Vegas. And I grew up on the east side of Las Vegas. And I was like, it's like a 30-minute drive over to the old church. I'm like, I wasn't feeling like the drive part to it for whatever reason. So we had made the drive across town. And I remember at that service, like they opened up with how they had just opened a brand new church, like a sister church in the southwest part of Las Vegas. And I was like, what? I'm like, that's like totally like answering all my prayers. I'm like, I wasn't sure I wanted to do the drive across town. Not that 30 minutes is that far, but for some reason, sometimes it feels like a lot, right? To get ready in the morning and then like have the time to get across town.
It does.
And so I remember we came back that week and I researched it and I found out exactly where it was. And it was like 5 minutes from my house, maybe less. And we started going. And I remember it was still it was a new startup church. So it was at a high school gym. And I was able to join in early on. I think they were like about a year planted there at that point. And I was able to get involved with the women's ministry, and I became a children's ministry teacher, like helping in like the kindergarten classroom, and helped like their creative directors with putting programs together. And I just really involved myself. I kind of threw myself almost like head in because I hadn't stepped away and like a big step away, but I had been out for so long that I was like craving that nourishment and like that feeding that I needed to get from his word. So I remember just getting super involved, and that was like the best blessing I could have asked for. I was able, like the church, I was with that church until we left Las Vegas, which is about 6 years ago now. It's still my home church. Like when I think of church, like that's still my home church. That's like the place that I feel like I didn't grow up there because I was a young adult when I went, but I feel like I grew up like spiritually there. Like they were able to take me on that journey that I needed. And I was craving so bad at that point in my life when things still felt a mess after losing my mom. And just trying to find who I was and what I wanted to do with my life and how I wanted to show up in the world. So, and that was definitely what spearheaded a lot of that time frame for me, was connecting with the people from that community and just getting involved, because it's hard to get involved, right? Especially and when it's I think it was helpful for me that it was a newer church, so it was still smaller. Because when I go back now, like we were in Vegas over the holidays, and we went to Christmas Eve service, and it's such a massive church now. I couldn't even imagine like trying to get connected and plugged in that big, huge environment. But
Mm-hmm.
it was exactly the place I needed with what I was going through at that point in my life.
Yes, yes. I find like community is everything. And I'm always trying to like bridge the gap between like spirituality and business. You know, I feel like sometimes it feels like there are no resources for like business minded people or business owners, and we're wanting to like, okay, God, how can I feel encouraged, how can I feel, you know, motivated and have that spiritual side there. Sometimes it feels like that, but when I think about church and community and serving, it also makes me think about what type of community do I build around my business, right? How do I serve in addition to just, you know, bring on clients all the time? How can I serve in my business as well? You know, and that's through,
Yeah.
you know, giving, charity, vendors and all that kind of beautiful stuff. How do you, how would you say you've bridged the gap between, and I say there's a gap, you may tell me there is no gap. Just, you know, you tell me whatever's on your heart, right? But that gap, I feel between like the spirituality and the business side of things. Because a lot of times at church, no one talks to you about business at church, you know. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it needs to come across the floor, but you know how they have those extra little pieces, like extra little groups or so, where you can go and like
Yeah.
learn and develop and see how you would build a business as, say, being a person of faith and a person that is a Christian and all that beautiful stuff. Any thoughts
Yeah.
around that? I know I kind of threw a lot out there.
Yeah. As far as like the gap piece, that resonated with me when you said there's a gap between the two, because it's almost two separate. Like your business is your business and your spiritual family life is like over in this other container, right? And it's hard in this day and age in this society, I even feel like, to like be okay blending that together, which is why I love like the platform that you're standing on. I talk about being a Christian lightly, like in my conversations. It's not as big of a what's the right word, like front view of my brand. It's not something that's like heavily like when you get to know me, like you'll get to see my value and who I am and how I show up, and it might be mentioned, but it's not a part of like that big brand. But it made me think because when you're starting your business, like you want to be around people who are like-minded, people who support you and get you and understand you. And I don't have that same community here in California where I'm at. But when I was in Las Vegas, we had like a women's business Christian, women's in business Christian like get together, like a monthly networking event, which was beautiful. One of my friends had hosted it, and it was basically like the whole city would come together. Like not the whole city, like it wasn't that huge, but like the women that were in business that were looking for a way to grow their businesses and network and market, but in a way where they could, like speakers could come in and speak to our hearts and to our souls and like nourish us in different ways than if you go to like a typical networking event, right? Like it's usually just like, here's the speaker, here's what they're talking about, take this business tip and run with it, which is great and it's awesome. But it is nice to have that connection in more of a spiritual way and with people who are on that journey with you and that are believers. So I think it's important to try to bridge that gap by just finding ways to network with people and to show up in that space. I don't have that right now where I live at. I haven't found any faith-based like networking groups, but I know that they're probably out there. Maybe I haven't looked in the right spot, or I'm not willing to drive as far. I already admitted that I don't love driving 30 minutes across town. So I live in my bubble. It can be hard too, because I'm like an hour from San Diego. I'm an hour from LA. So I could easily, I'm sure there's groups in different areas. But if there's not a group too, like start one would be a great thing. Like I started a meetup group, and it's not necessarily faith-based, but like I said, like the women that come to the group, we all connect and we get to know each other. And most of them are Christians. I feel like you attract people that are like you and, you know, that get who you are. So it's definitely important just to like fill that gap by trying to, even if it's not like your main focal point, like just showing up authentically as yourself and not being afraid to say like that you do go to church and that you are a believer, and showing up in that way. That's enough. Like that's like the breadcrumbs that people need sometimes, is just knowing that there's other people out there that are believers and are running their businesses and they're showing up just as they are.
Yes, I feel like that was so important for me when I first started. Like I started my business back in 2015. Oh, well, I guess I should shift because there was the makeup business and I shifted. The makeup business started in 2011 and then this coaching business started in 2015. So I remember when, I was like, wait, I'm a coach. That's my natural gifting. Yay!
Yeah.
And I had volunteered at the Army Community Service Center and I was the business liaison for helping the military spouses like get their businesses started overseas. Because when we lived in Korea, we couldn't work on the economy. You couldn't work. There were only a certain slots available for us because certain slots were designated for the Korean national. So that would lower the employment opportunity for us as spouses. So a lot of the spouses were like, what is the alternative? We need to start our own businesses, which my mind was kind of already there from what happened with when we were in Kansas and all that stuff. So when I went to Korea, I already knew the answer to that. I was like, start your own business. So I helped the ladies to like get legal with starting their businesses. I helped them with figuring out what type of business they should even start. And then also, what are those services going to look like, right? If you say, I love cooking, I want to be a chef. What are the different, avenues or services that you can create to earn additional income as being a chef? Yes, you can cook for events, but you can teach lessons, So I was doing that kind of stuff and I was volunteering. So I really got what you were talking about as far as like the skills being transferable into like your own coaching business. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
I was kind of already doing that, which is kind of cool. But I shared that story. Why did I share that story? I shared that story around the, building the businesses and the military spouses and all of that, because I was going to make a connection somewhere and I lost it. Look, when I go back and listen to the recording, I'll be like, oh, that's the connection I was trying to go with that. But I do
love that you mentioned like, and I think that this is so common, especially as coaches, like we are who we are because those are our God-given trades, right? Like God's created us to be certain types of people, and that doesn't change as you grow up. Like you might, like you're more aware of it, you're heightenedly aware of it. Like you start to sense it, you start to become known for it. You start to realize like it's a skill that you can add to your resume or to your website or wherever, because these are skills that you're slowly learning and it's becoming apparent. And it's not like, some of us take longer, I feel like, to realize it. Like you might be doing something for years, like myself, like I didn't realize that I was skilled at helping people until all of a sudden, like somebody was speaking to me in a different language, which was business coaching, like in a totally different shift. And I was like, oh, it was like a light bulb moment, right? Like that's when like the light bulb goes off. So each of us have different skills that are like they're built into us from the beginning. And it's when we recognize them that we have to like lean in and like listen more and be like, oh, like this has been here all along. Like, why didn't I see it till now?
And then we have to be willing to see ourselves in a different light. And that was something you said earlier. I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. Being willing to see yourself in a different light. Because when it was time to shift from that makeup artistry business, which I still do makeup, which is awesome, but to see myself in a different light as a coach, as a branding strategist, or as a mindset coach, it was almost like, I don't know if it's safe to do that. Like, am I allowed to do that? And I was looking for, people that I could look to and say, okay, who's done this before? What does it look like? What would it look like? And on my search to doing that, because of the fact that mindset is so heavy for me and my business, like, and I do the energy healing work, and I didn't start off doing the energy healing work, but it was deep mindset work. I kept running across a lot of mindset work that didn't naturally line up with like the Bible. There was always some piece of it that felt off to me, as I was almost like, you can have what you want whenever you want. You just got to work really hard for it, or you got to think really hard about it and you'll get it. And that was like the theme I kept getting. I was like, but wait a second, sometimes we don't get what we want. So how there's some piece of this that isn't matching up. And that's where I began to get exposed to more of the new age beliefs around, the law of attraction, which the law of attraction is an actual, it is an actual law, but it's how do we implement that law? What are our expectations around that law? And where does the authority fall within that law, right? We try to make ourselves the authority on that law when God is really the authority. So there was just these little fine line nuances I kept coming across. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was operating in a way where, God, I was almost demanding you to give me what I want when I want it in my business. And it all stemmed from the business, because when you're growing that business, it can become, it can be put on a pedestal. That becomes the main thing that we're focusing on, instead of allowing God to whisper or allow God to speak to our hearts. So I think that was in that journey and that transition over to okay, I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to encourage other women. I wanted to make sure that if I was just doing strictly the strategy pieces, if that was my main portion, I think that, or my only portion, I can see how there's certain businesses where you're doing more of that strategy work, or you're doing a product, or you're doing something more concrete, and you don't have to have, God doesn't have to be served on the plate, right? So I totally get that. There's a time and place for it. But when I was really going deep and peeling back layers with women, it was I couldn't hide who I was in that process of peeling back those layers, or relating to her and sharing my own story. God was coming up every single time, because that's how I grew. I had to give him the glory. God is doing this. It's not me. When our bill got paid off, or we got that bill that came in the mail and it said it was paid off, and I don't know who paid it, that's God. He did that, right? Yeah. So when I stopped marketing my business for 2 months and I got all these extra clients, God did that, not me, because I wasn't working. I wasn't working at the time. I was too mad, had attitude about things going on in my life, and he was continually blessing during that time, So it's how do I share? I have to share those stories. I have to give him the credit and the glory for that. But I think it definitely all stemmed from not seeing the women in business that had the same goals and aspirations as I did. They weren't necessarily faith-minded or biblically based. And I kept looking for those people. So I think that's what really prompts this podcast as well. It's I want to speak to the women that are in business. They're not afraid to make money. They are not afraid to charge for their services, and they're going to talk about it. And they're going to help, the listeners with any type of resources, tools, tricks, whatever that is, and talk about their faith, So I think that's where this whole thing stems from, where my heart comes from on it. So
I love that you mentioned that it came from peeling back those layers, because that's when you can make those true connections and relationships, right, with your ideal audience and people that are coming to you. The deeper you go in those layers, that's when you're showing. It's not that surface level anymore. It's the deep emotional connection. And that's where relationship happens. Relationships don't happen from that superficial front. So I love that you're willing to go deeper and to share your stories, which is going to help them share their stories in return and help them get the changes that they're looking for.
Yes. And I know that you said personal branding and business coach. Is there any type of, I guess, tips or tricks or things that you want to share with those
listening
and all that wonderful stuff? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm sure you got
some awesome stuff. For sure. I think the biggest thing to recognize is something I'll back up for a second. So the things that I struggled with when I became a business coach is I knew what to teach everybody else, but I didn't start by doing the work for myself. I came from retail management to owning my own business and coaching at the same time. So had I just been doing the coaching piece, I would have been fine, but I had no marketing background whatsoever when I started my business. I didn't go get customers for Best Buy, right? I was out there selling to the people that walked in the door. So I really it took me about 2 years before I really had the big red light go off. I was getting clients before that, but they were kind of sporadic and there was no method to my madness, as I like to say it. But at that 2-year mark, I really sat back and really looked at the foundational pieces for my business. So what I help my clients with now is the foundational pieces and setting up your business to where you know exactly who your niche is. Like, who's your niche market? Who do you want to work with? Where are your skill levels at so that you can shine? What do you want to do? Not what are other people telling you that you should do. Like, if you're a great cook and everybody tells you you're an amazing cook, you should open a restaurant, but you have no desire whatsoever to open up a restaurant. Like, don't open a restaurant. But if that's your desire and you're like, oh, I do love to cook and I do love teaching people to cook. So I want to teach people how to, you know, to cook from online and like do a YouTube channel or whatever. But get clear on what your niche is. Do what feels really good to you. And then also look at your skill levels. Where's your passion at? And then I teach them how to share their brand story. Like, what's your origin story for why you started your business? People want to know you. Like we were talking about, like peeling back those layers. They need to know who you are and why you do what you do and why it's important to you. And that's going to come across super authentic and have people leaning in and wanting to learn more. I help my clients now with like their ideal client work. I don't just do like the demographic side of it. I'm big on doing the psychographics and getting like super deep. Like, what is it about your ideal clients that's keeping them awake at 4 a.m.? Like, and then why is that? And then when they answer, like, why is that important? And why is that important? Like, dig really deep into those questions so that you really know who your people are. That way you can speak to them. If I'm completely honest, the first 2 years of my business, I was super vague. I was like, I can coach business owners. I don't care what kind of business you have. I can help everybody. And yeah, I could, I guess, to a degree, but I was basically, what do they say? When you speak to everybody, you speak to nobody.
Exactly.
And that's what I was doing those first 2 years. I didn't know who my ideal client was. I didn't really sit down and get super clear and specific for myself so that I could use that in my messaging and in my marketing pieces. So now I help them discover their niche, get their ideal client work detailed out. I help them with their brand story, help them with create their messaging so that they're able to call in and attract the right people and stand out online. I specifically work now with online service-based entrepreneurs because like that's more of a niche. That's a place I can speak to. That's a place that I've been able to grow my business, as well as I'm able to help my clients grow these businesses and help them create a successful business. So we do like the brand foundation work, and then I walk them through making sure their website is set up the proper way so that when people land on it, they know exactly what they do, and then making sure they're spending the right amount of time in their business too. A lot of people think that you own a business and you have to work 40 plus hours a week. Like, I left retail management because I was burnt out and exhausted and fried. And now most of my clients work like 35 hours or less per week in their businesses because we get really clear and systematic with it. Like, if you know what marketing strategies you're working on and what you need to do each week, like, you have 10 hours. I do what I call it a 10 by 10 strategy. So you have 10 different marketing strategies going, and you have 10 hours per week that you're marketing your business. Because if you fill up your roster and you're only coaching your clients, or you're only creating design for your clients, or whatever type of work you're doing, and you're not marketing your business, but as soon as that client's gone, then there's nowhere to go fishing for again. So helping them get really clear on their strategy and how they want to show up and which strategies work best for them. Like we mentioned earlier, like, just because somebody else is doing a marketing strategy and it seems to be working for them, it doesn't mean it's going to be one that you enjoy doing.
Work for you.
If you don't enjoy doing it, you're not going to show up the right way, right? You're not going to be able to create the value that you're coming from it. Like, if you don't want to create a blog and you don't like writing, then maybe you like doing videos. Like, do videos. That's totally fine. Like, but if you try to make yourself do something that you don't love doing, it's going to show up that way. Your heart's not going to be in it. It's not going to show as well. So I help them make sure they have all those strategies in place so they can create a thriving, profitable business.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, I love it so much. One thing I can say for my business is that before I started the coaching, I did have the business background because I was doing the makeup artistry business. I had to secure those clients. I had to niche myself. Like, I knew I was working with commercial and production teams. That's where I wanted to niche myself. I didn't want to do the one-to-one face where I'm just doing makeup for anybody or doing makeup for events and only being able to charge $50 to $75 a face. I wanted to work where the rates were, and I wanted to niche down, and I made more money that way, you know? So I have that experience from running the business. And then when it came time, and like I said, some of the experience from volunteering and doing that, but it was one of those things where I didn't make the connection. I didn't think I could still call myself a business coach, like literally, because remember, I just shifted into this in 2015. I don't think it's until last year that I actually had the confidence to call myself a business coach. And I still even say an intuitive business coach because it is from an intuitive process. I didn't go to, you know, a big old college, a fancy named college with the business strategy and all that kind of stuff, you know, business and finance and all those other extra pieces that fall under it. But I do call myself an intuitive business coach. And then the whole energy healing side of things, it comes in place because I know that people can have the strategies, they can learn all these beautiful foundational pieces about their business, and then they still won't take the action because there's something internal that's blocking them. There's a story that they are, you know, living by or that they're not releasing. So I think that this whole idea of like when we're building our businesses and skipping that foundational piece and like going straight into making these offers. I hope that people listening realize that, okay, if you're just going straight into making offers and you don't have that foundational piece, that's why you're not getting that connection. That's why you're not getting those clients through the door because you're not actually handling the foundational pieces.
Yeah.
Another
It's just like building a house. Like if you have to have a solid foundation for your house, otherwise everything's going to come crumbling down. And it might work for a little bit. Like I said, like I got clients those first 2 years. They were sporadic. They were different types of markets. They were different. But it, like, once that foundation was built, I was like, why did it take me 2 years to figure this out?
And what you figured out in 2 years, you can teach people that now, like in a cohesive little program for them. When we were talking about like our skills and things that we didn't realize made connection, I'll share one more piece with you and then we'll be bringing this to a close. I sold insurance for like 2 years. I had like a sales background. And when I went over my numbers from last year, like I just went through all my discovery calls and looked at the ones that I closed and I did the math on it. I had a 70% closing ratio. I was like, is this, I need to pay more attention to that. It's something I didn't even pay any attention to. Yeah. So now it is that, okay, what am I going to do with that? That was a skill I had. I brought it to my business. It's beautiful. It's great. But now I want to help people with that as well. Like, how do you close a sale on the phone? And it's one of those things where like, can I see myself in that light? Am I going to give myself permission to launch that? Am I going to give myself permission to show up in that capacity? And I'm going to say, yes, I'm going to give myself permission. Maybe February or so. But just wanted to speak to that again about how there are those skills and talents and different things that we have that we've overlooked. I've been coaching for 5 years. Not once did I think about doing a sales program until 5 years in, because I'm giving myself more permission to show up and do the things that are a fit for me and not what I see everybody else doing. Right. Yeah. So just,
and it'll come to you at the right time too. It's not something that you don't have to do everything all at once. Like wait till you feel confident in it and you feel ready, because you've learned over the past 5 years too, right? Like new skills, new tips. And like, so you're taking your old experiences and you're pairing them with your new ones. And that's where like the magic happens, because you're up leveling yourself. It's like a new leadership energy that you've created for yourself, that you're like, wait, I can do this because I've been able to do this and this. And now I'm marrying those two together. And now I can become this person, where 5 years ago, you might not have been ready.
I believe it. I so believe it. 5 years ago, I didn't see myself that way. And it's like, no, they didn't have the language to even speak that way. So I love how we have to give ourselves permission to grow, not try to move so quickly or get so discouraged if things aren't connecting as quickly as we think they should. Don't give up just yet, right? Because over time, it does come together. Yeah. So I really did appreciate and enjoy our connection. How long have we been on? An hour? I don't even know. I'm like worried about keeping you too late.
Yeah, I think we've been on an hour.
Okay, great. Yeah. It's really good, but I'm like, I want to respect her time because I can keep talking and talking some more. But I did want to ask a question. I can ask you this afterward. But I'll ask the question out loud so people know what we will be talking about next, so they won't feel left out. But I would love to talk to you further about ways that we can collaborate together. Because I think that as women in business, you know, we should do more of that collaboration, coming together, just learning about how we can help each other. So I'm definitely open to having another conversation about that. So just let me know when you would like to have that conversation. We can email or message and figure that all out. So
Definitely.
I know if I ask that now, we're going to get into it. And it may take, you know, a whole nother 30 minutes. And that's not what we're trying to do, have a 90-minute podcast. So,
right.
well, I hope that the ladies in the Facebook group, like that are listening, that are watching that, and, you know, if you want to start a watch party on this, because that helps too, you know, for it to repopulate in the group and everything, that they have been just blessed by learning more about you, hearing your story, knowing your heart and your expertise that you bring to the table, which I think is so amazing. When you said 2007, I was like, she's an OG, okay? Because 2007, I'm like, what was I doing in 2007? Look, I'll be pretty transparent. I had just retired from exotic dancing in 2007. So I was just getting off somebody's pole. Okay. So I have no idea about, like, you know, being in a position of leadership, being in a position to really coach someone or do all of that. I was still trying to find myself. I'm definitely a late bloomer. I will tell you that for sure.
I think you're right on time.
Oh,
you're right on time.
Thank you.
Like, it's all about like when the right time is, and each of our times are totally different. So
yes, that's so true. I'm going to, you know what? You just inspired me to stop calling myself that, because that's my story. That's my narrative. I'm such a late bloomer. But no, I got to start shifting that narrative for sure. So thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So I am going to stop